I'm going to do very quick closing remarks. And I want to start by building on what was just said. Let us remind ourselves that when we're up, everyone is up with us. And that's for the political leadership as well. When we're down alone. And I think one of the things that actually leaders continuously tell me, including, by the way, the Prince of Wales, who I worked with, now King Charles, for 10 years, is, why is it that when I do the wrong thing, everyone is on my back, including NGOs, and when I do the right thing, no one tells me? So my plea, as we finish that session, and we move now very quickly into my closing remarks, is to remind all of us that when we do have brave leadership, we remember to tell those brave leaders that they're being brave. And when we start to feel that they're sliding because they're under attack, that we come up with every possible solution so that they can keep their pants on. That is our responsibility. And now I'm going to quickly move through what I heard today and finish. The first is we have no room for linear thinking anymore. The complexity of the challenges that we have before us are calling out for holistic, systemic approaches. That is our only way forward. And it is not only those of us who are working in this field. It has now been called out by CEOs across the globe that the greatest risks are multidisciplinary risks, the social, environmental, and economic risks. So when we see CEOs in companies tell us it's too difficult, remind them of this. This is fundamental. This is what they're saying. We also need to remember that indeed, GDP does not function anymore. Global resource productivity is declining. The fact of the matter is we cannot continue to abuse our resources in the way that we have. That global well-being is declining. That there is no proper wealth distribution. That actually GDP growth plus population growth plus climate change means negative well-being and high social tension. Most people across the globe that we surveyed in G20 countries are saying we want a different type of economy, an economy that ensures that we have well-being for people and planet. So, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? What does that leave us with? Who can we bring on board? Because we keep on hearing from some social media channels that somehow people, and most people, increasingly citizens, do not believe in climate change, do not think that biodiversity is important, and are not frightened about the planet, that they want business as usual. Well, first of all, lo and behold, 72% agree that ecocide should be a criminal offense. That is, destroying nature should be brought to tribunals. That 88% are worried about the state of nature today. And 87% are worried about how we'll leave it for the future and for future generations. This is coming out of a survey that we've just completed and actually launched last week. 69% of people are aware that we're reaching tipping points, both social and environmental. This is G20 people. This is not just a niche market of citizens. 52% of people in the G20 feel exposed to climate and environmental risks. And people in emerging economies feel more personally exposed to climate change compared to those in Europe and the United States. And that's logical, because most of them are the most vulnerable. But we now understand that we have a variety of different types of segments of the population. And this is something that we've been working on. We've heard, how do we build a new narrative? Where do we get the new thinking out to influencers, to TikTokers, to people who can speak the language that's necessary to convince more citizens to come on the journey? We need to understand that there are some who qualify themselves as planetary stewards, or others that are concerned optimists, others that are what are steady progressives characterized by their pragmatic and moderate approach. or climate skeptics, or the completely unengaged? How do we tap into those last three categories? Because these guys, we don't really need so much anymore. We know that we've reached social tipping points where more people care for and want action, not only to protect the planet, but also to ensure that people's concerns are taken into account. We are seeing growing wealth on the back of energy poverty across the globe. 2.8 billion windfall profits for oil and gas companies, 2.8 billion per day, while people are struggling. What most of those surveyed said is they are ready, including those, by the way, that voted for the radical right in some parts of Europe. They are ready to pay their fair share. Fair share. And I think that's very important when we think about policy. So what is the pathway of hope? What is the pathway of hope, especially for someone who heads up an organization that 50 years ago said there were limits to growth, and here we are, aha, wow. Somehow, we've landed, we knew we would land in this space. This is the beginning of a journey, and we already have, and in fact, again, thank you, Madam President, for supporting the compass that myself and Janusz Potocznik and others brought together in order to rethink value-based decision-making. Because again, we need to come up with a strategy that enables our policymakers to move forward when they are being opposed by so many others. We need to think about how we can have a system change compass of hope and value for humanity. How can we rewire humanity into everything we do? And by the way, humanity does not mean we don't take into consideration nature, because remember, we are nature. Humanity reminds us that we are just a speck in the universe, and somehow our arrogance and our ego has gotten in the way. Humanity reminds us that we need to redefine what true leadership is, but also what true prosperity is for everyone and everything. It also means that we need to think about new types of economic models. Models that take into consideration social and environmental risk across financial architecture, which for the moment is purely based on shareholder value, and new economic decision-making. It means that we need to connect and correct the inequity between high and low-income countries. Today, I was speaking to African countries across the UN who are working with us on a system dynamic model that we've just launched in Africa, bringing together social and environmental tipping points, because they want to stay within planetary boundaries. But they also want all of us to remember that poverty and inequality is why they cannot. And that is our responsibility, who have continued to grow in the global north. When we talk about degrowth models, it's not that we don't want economic development, and especially not in the global south, but we've gone way over the immorality curve in terms of the types of growth that we've enabled here. Growth in particular that has not been redistributed, and in particular has taken a real toll on the planet. So we have to change our perspective of public goods and socialize the rewards. We talked about accounting mechanisms today. How can we put nature on the balance sheet? How can we put education on the balance sheet? How can we put social care on the balance sheet? And this was the most important point during COVID. How can we ensure that we put in place new indicators that buffer GDP, because we know that at 1.5 degrees, we will lose 2.5% to 3% of GDP. And that at 3 degrees, and by the way, we also know that we've already pretty much surpassed 1.5, that is another reality check. At 3 degrees, we could be anywhere close to 10 or 12%. So why are we still only using GDP as the sole value of our economy, when we already know that the cost of inaction is going to cost us GDP, and that GDP is the reason why we're in the mess that we're in? The perversities of the things that we have done means that we must start to address feedback loops. We must start to think systemically. We must bring in a completely different way of thinking. And it seems complex, but actually it can be quite simple. Because it's constantly thinking about optimization. It's thinking about going back to what matters. Something we've totally lost sight of. This race for the money, rather than thinking that, oh gosh, if we continue to only have wealth in the hands of a few, then we're going to have distrust. That actually, if we erode the role of the public sector and only let markets dictate what we want, we will only continue to perpetuate wealth in the hands of a few. That the regulation that we have is fundamental because it is what drives companies, investors, and gives them the signal of the pathway that we need to take. I'm almost finished. I only have a couple more slides. But the last one is very important because it was my creative moment during this morning. These are some of the ways in which we're trying to bring forward some of this thinking with so many others. There are incredible leaders. You've heard them this morning, and I want to thank Maria and Steffi from the bottom of my heart for having the foresight to have this incredible gathering. Can we thank them, please? I want to thank Germany for also being the country who continued to honor the limits to growth in its educational programs, who continued to actually, when we published Earth for All, put it up on the bestseller list. Because here in Germany, even though we see those tensions that I've spoken about, there have been a generation of people who have grown up with the knowledge, the deep embedded knowledge that something wasn't quite right. Now, how do we bring more people on the journey? We need to move to some kind of poetry. And so here is my attempt today, as I listen to all of you, to give you a bit of poetry. It's kind of like urban poetry. I wish Lisa was here, by the way. She did a beautiful opening and she's had to go home. But if Lisa and I could have done it, she would have actually done the beat bop behind me, as her musical talents are such. This is my ode to DLD Nature. Nature is me, and I am nature. If nature is my blood, my lifeline, my mother, then nature is our collective guarantee for healthy people on a healthy planet, as it is the systemic web of life, as Vandera told us. If nature makes me healthy and happy, then I must honor and live in complete equilibrium and sensory synergy, as Alexa told us, within a broader ecosystem. Then I must shift from the ego to the eco, from the me to the broader notion of the we, inclusive of all species. How can I value nature through my conscious and unconscious actions and deeds? How can I feel and act on what I know? How do I shift from nature as separate from me, as an extractive resource, as purely an experience, rather than every part of who I am, in solidarity with all species? Nature has fueled our wealth, our health, and yet we pay her back by exploiting her, violating her through the land we stand on, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. So if nature is capital, then capital is nature. And that means nature is every part of our economy, our society, and our plan, not just to survive, but to thrive. It is our insurance plan, that's wrong, insurance plan, that was from this morning. And thank you, Allianz, for emergence from emergency. It asks for a different type of growth, where we evolve together towards collective well-being. On this day and from this day forth, let us individually and collectively remember that nature is our history, and nature is our destiny. Thank you.